I still remember the day my son broke my heart. It was a Tuesday afternoon when James called. I was sitting at my small kitchen table in my modest apartment on the east side, surrounded by bills I was struggling to pay. The faded wallpaper and worn furniture told the story of years of sacrifice, but I didn't mind. My eyes were fixed on his college graduation photo, him in his cap and gown, smiling proudly. 10 years of sacrifices, working 3 jobs, selling my wedding ring, giving up every comfort I once knew, all to pay for his education at that prestigious university, all worth it to see him succeed where I appeared to have failed. Before I go on, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I'd love to know who's out there, hearing this story with their heart. The phone's ring startled me out of my thoughts. "Mom," his voice came through, vibrant with excitement. "I have amazing news. I'm engaged." My heart soared as I clutched the phone tighter. "Engaged? Oh my God! To Clarissa? When do I get to meet her?" There was a long pause on the line. Too long. I could hear him breathing, choosing his words carefully. "That's actually why I'm calling," James finally said, his tone shifting. "The engagement party is in 2 weeks at her parents' estate in Greenwich. I'll be there. Just text me the address and—" "Mom," he cut me off, his voice tight. "I need to be honest with you. Clarissa comes from a very elite family. Her father owns half of Manhattan, practically. Her mother is on the board of the Metropolitan Museum." I waited, sensing there was more. The silence stretched between us like a growing chasm. "And," I prompted, though my stomach had already knotted with dread. "And I don't think they'd be comfortable meeting you," he finally said, the words tumbling out quickly now. "You know, the way you look, where you live, your accent, they're very particular about appearances." His voice trailed off, but the damage was done. I felt like I'd been slapped. My hand trembled as I clutched the phone. "What are you saying, James?" I asked quietly, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Maybe after the wedding," he continued, not hearing the pain in my voice. I've worked so hard to fit into their world. These connections will make my career. Please understand." "I understand perfectly," I whispered before hanging up. For hours I sat there, tears streaming down my face. The photo of James seemed to mock me now. My own son was ashamed of me, of my weathered hands, my simple clothes, my tiny apartment. All things I had chosen, sacrifices made for him. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room, my eyes drifted to the small photo frame on my bookshelf, partially hidden behind books and rarely noticed. It showed a younger version of me receiving the Innovation in Pharmaceutical Research Award 15 years ago. I was wearing an elegant black dress, my hair perfectly styled, standing confidently at a podium. You see, what my son didn't know, what I had deliberately kept from him, was that before he was born, I had been Dr. Maria Johnson, the founder of Johnson Pharmaceuticals. I'd developed a groundbreaking treatment for a rare autoimmune disease that had made millions and changed countless lives. My name had been in medical journals, on the covers of business magazines. I had spoken at conferences around the world. But when my husband died unexpectedly in a car accident while I was pregnant with James, everything changed. Grief consumed me, yes, but it also clarified what was important. I watched how people treated me differently because of my wealth, how they fawned over me at events but talked behind my back. I saw the emptiness in the eyes of children who had been given everything but earned nothing. I made a choice then. I sold my company for billions, put most of the money in a trust, and decided to raise my son away from privilege. I wanted him to develop character, resilience, and appreciation for hard work, values my own parents had instilled in me growing up in our working-class neighborhood. I changed our last name, moved to a modest apartment, and lived simply. I'd planned to tell him everything when he turned 30, to give him access to his inheritance when I believed he'd be mature enough to handle it. But now I had a different idea. That night, I couldn't sleep. James's words kept echoing in my head. Too poor, too ugly, they wouldn't be comfortable. By morning, my tears had dried, replaced by a steely resolve. I went to my bedroom and pulled up the loose floorboard beneath my bed. Inside the hidden compartment was a lockbox I hadn't opened in years. My fingers trembled slightly as I entered the combination. Inside was my old business card. Dr. Maria Johnson, Ph.D., founder, Johnson Pharmaceuticals. Next to it lay the black Amex card I hadn't used in years, several stock certificates, and the keys to my penthouse in the city that had been sitting empty all this time, maintained by the property management company I still paid. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, but hadn't called in years. Patricia, it's Maria. Yes, it's been a long time. I need you to arrange some things for me. I'm coming back. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Patricia, my former executive assistant who had stayed loyal even in my absence, worked miracles. She arranged appointments with the best stylists, ordered designer clothes, and prepared my penthouse for my return. She never questioned my sudden reappearance. That was why I had always valued her. The Harringtons are quite the social climbers. Patricia informed me over lunch at a discreet restaurant. Edward Harrington made his fortune in real estate development, but they've been desperately trying to break into the old money circles. Their charitable foundation is their ticket in. I nodded, taking in the information. And they've been trying. To get a meeting with me? With Dr. Johnson? For months, Patricia confirmed with a small smile. Your foundation's endorsement would give theirs considerable legitimacy. They don't know you've been living as a nobody, I finished for her, no bitterness in my voice. That was the point. You were never a nobody, Maria, Patricia said firmly. You just chose to be invisible for a while. The morning of the engagement party, I stood in my luxury penthouse overlooking Central Park, hardly recognizing myself in the full-length mirror. Gone was the worn, simple clothing and the gray hair I'd never bothered to color. The woman who stared back at me was elegant, powerful, the woman I used to be. My silver hair was now expertly colored and styled in soft waves. The designer dress I wore, a deep burgundy that complemented my dark skin perfectly, cost more than the rent of my apartment for a year. Diamond earrings, my mother's, retrieved from the safety deposit box, glittered at my ears. My makeup was flawless but subtle, emphasizing my best features while softening the lines that years of hard work had etched into my face. You look magnificent, Patricia said from behind me. Every bit the formidable Dr. Johnson they're expecting. Do you think he'll recognize me? I asked quietly. Patricia's expression softened. James hasn't seen this version of you since he was a baby, but a son always knows his mother. My phone rang. My driver was waiting. Not just any car. I'd arranged for a Rolls-Royce Phantom, complete with chauffeur. If I was going to make an entrance, it would be unforgettable. As we pulled up to the Harrington estate in Greenwich, a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens and valets parking expensive cars, I felt a moment of doubt. Was I being petty? Vindictive? No, I decided. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. Sometimes people need to see the consequences of their judgments. When I stepped out of the Rolls, several heads turned. I handed my embossed invitation to the doorman, who bowed slightly as he read the name. Dr. Johnson, welcome. The Harringtons have been expecting you. I smiled. I'm sure they have. When I entered the grand ballroom, whispers followed me as I glided through the crowd. No one recognized me as James's mother. How could they? This version of me was something he'd never seen. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and surveyed the room, finally spotting him across the floor. My son, handsome in his tuxedo, arm around a beautiful blonde woman I assumed was Clarissa. His future in-laws, the Harringtons, were beside them, looking every bit the elite family he'd described, polished, poised, and profoundly artificial. I took a deep breath and made my move. "Excuse me," I said to a waiter, making sure my voice carried just enough. "Could you please tell Mr. Harrington that Dr. Maria Johnson would like to discuss the donation to their foundation?" The waiter nodded eagerly and hurried across the room. I watched as he whispered in Edward Harrington's ear. The man's eyes widened, and he immediately excused himself from his conversation, scanning the room until his gaze landed on me. Recognition flickered, not of me as a person, but of my name, my reputation, my supposed value to him. I sipped my champagne and waited as James's future father-in-law rushed over to me, hand already extended, his smile too wide to be genuine. "Dr. Johnson, what an unexpected honor," he gushed, pumping my hand enthusiastically. "We've been trying to secure a meeting with you for months regarding our charity." "I know," I replied coolly. "I make it a point to thoroughly research the families my foundation supports." Of course," he nodded eagerly. "Please, let me introduce you to my wife and daughter, and her fiancé. Brilliant young man. Works at Preston and Myers. I'm sure you'd find him fascinating." "I'm sure I would," I said, allowing him to guide me across the room. As we approached the small group, I caught James mid-laugh. He looked happy, confident in this world of wealth and status. For a moment, I almost turned around, not wanting to shatter the life he'd built. But then I remembered his words. Too poor, too ugly. The steel returned to my spine. "Darling," Edward called to his wife, "this is Dr. Maria Johnson, the pharmaceutical pioneer I've been telling you about. Dr. Johnson, my wife Margaret, my daughter Clarissa, and her fiancé James." "Wilson." James turned, his expression polite, but disinterested at first, just another of his future father-in-law's business connections. Then our eyes met. I saw the moment of confusion, followed by dawning recognition, then complete shock as the color drained from his face. "Dr. Johnson is considering a substantial contribution to our foundation," Edward continued, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding before him. "Actually," I said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I'm here because my son is engaged. To your daughter." I turned directly to James, whose mouth had fallen slightly open. "James, darling, aren't you going to introduce me to your fiancé properly?" The silence that fell over our little group was deafening. Clarissa looked between James and me in confusion. Margaret Harrington's perfectly composed face showed the first cracks of uncertainty. "Mom?" James finally whispered, the word barely audible. "What is this?" "This," I said calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching, "is who I've always been. I just wanted you to appreciate the value of hard work before you knew about the money." Edward Harrington looked between us, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and calculation. "James, this is your mother? Dr. Johnson. Is your mother?" James nodded, seemingly unable to form words. "But you said your mother was—" Margaret began, then stopped herself, suddenly aware of the delicacy of the situation. "A cleaning lady?" I finished for her, my voice level. "I was, among other things. I believe in honest work, Mrs. Harrington, something I wanted my son to understand before he inherited my fortune." Clarissa was the first to recover. To my surprise, she stepped forward and took my hands in hers. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Dr. Johnson. James has told me so much about you, about your kindness and your sacrifices for him." Her eyes were warm, genuine, though clearly not everything. She shot James a look that contained both confusion and reproach. He had the grace to look ashamed. The night continued in a blur of revelations and recalibrations. The Harringtons, to their credit, adjusted quickly. Too quickly, perhaps, their initial shock morphing seamlessly into fawning respect that had nothing to do with me as a person, and everything to do with my net worth and social standing. They were skilled social climbers indeed. Throughout the evening, I watched James struggle to reconcile the two versions of his mother, The simple, hardworking woman who had raised him, and the powerful, wealthy socialite now commanding the room. He kept glancing at me from across the ballroom, his expression a mixture of confusion, shame, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Surprisingly, the Harringtons were more impressed by my research contributions than my wealth. Edward cornered me by the bar, no longer discussing their foundation, but eagerly asking about my breakthrough drug development. Your work on autoimmune? Treatments changed the field, he said, and for the first time that evening, his interest seemed genuine. My sister has lupus. Your medication gave her back her life. The revelation softened me slightly. Perhaps there was more to these people than I had assumed, just as there was more to me than James had allowed his fiancée's family to see. Clarissa remained by my side for much of the night, asking thoughtful questions about my research and my choice to raise James without the trappings of wealth. It was brave, she said quietly. I wish my parents had thought to do something similar. As the party began to wind down, I stepped out onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The night air was cool against my skin, the stars bright above the manicured gardens. Footsteps sounded behind me, and I knew without turning that it was James. Why? He asked simply, coming to stand beside me at the stone balustrade. Why didn't you tell me? I turned to look at my son, this accomplished, handsome man who had somehow lost his way despite all my efforts. Would it have mattered? I coolly replied. Would you have become the man you are if you'd grown up with privilege? Or would you have become the kind of man who judges people by their appearance and wealth? He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I'm so sorry, Mom. What I said on the phone, I've never been more ashamed of anything in my life. I'm not sorry, I said, because now I know exactly who you are, and you know who I am. The question is, who do you want to be now? I don't understand how you could forgive me after what I said, he whispered, tears in his eyes. I reached up to touch his face, the way I used to when he was a little boy with skinned knees or hurt feelings. I'm your mother, James. I will always love you. But loving someone doesn't mean you don't see their flaws. It means you love them anyway and hope they'll do better. He nodded, wiping his eyes quickly. When did you plan to tell me about all this? About who you really are? On your 30th birthday, I said. I have a trust fund set up for you, but I'm considering whether you're ready for it even then. I don't deserve it, he said immediately. Not after how I treated you. It's not about deserving, James. It's about what you'll do with it. Will you become one of these people who measure others by their bank accounts and addresses? Or will you remember what it was like to work hard for what you have? He was quiet for a long moment. I want to be more like you, he finally said. Strong enough to walk away from all this when it matters. He gestured toward the glittering party behind us. You don't have to walk away, I said. Just don't let it change who you are. We stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, James spoke again. Will you come back to your real life now? The penthouse and the company and all of it? I smiled. That's not my real life, James. My real life was raising you, working honest jobs, living simply. I don't regret a single day of it. Not even when your son was a complete jerk? He asked, with a sad smile. Especially not then, I replied, because that's when the real lessons happen. Later that night, as my driver took me back to the city, I reflected on the evening. The revelation hadn't gone as I'd imagined. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic scene like in the movies, just a mother and son finding their way back to truth, and perhaps a family learning to see beyond appearances. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from letting people discover the truth on their own. My son learned that day that appearances can be deceiving, and that true worth has nothing to do with money or looks. And I learned that sometimes you have to lose yourself to find out who others really are. I would return to my small apartment tomorrow. The designer dress would go back in storage, the diamonds back in the safety deposit box. But something had changed. The truth was out now, not just about my wealth, but about the values I had tried to instill in my son. Whether those lessons had truly taken root, only time would tell. But for tonight, as the city lights glittered like stars around us, I felt hope. Not all who wander in darkness stay lost forever. Sometimes they find their way back to the light, guided by love that never dims, no matter how deeply it's been buried. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay with us for the next story. It's already waiting for you on the screen. Because every story told by a grandmother carries the strength of generations. Click and keep listening. We'll be right here.